Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We are pretty close to the end of the school year. I think most classes have about a week left before things shut down for the summer, and today will be our last day of full events of the 2023-2024 school year. I think we've hosted somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 live lessons for classrooms across North America and around the world. And today we are signing off with 3 live events. So this morning we were live in the Florida Keys with the Sea Turtle Hospital. We're about to go live with the Duke Lemur Center in North Carolina. And then at 2 o'clock today, we'll connect with the Darwin 200 team on the Oosterschelde in the middle of the Pacific Ocean as they make their way towards Mangareva. So let's get right into today's event. We love spending time with the Duke Lemur Center, which is a 100-acre sanctuary for rare and endangered lemurs. So located at the Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. It is a place where you can find, I believe, 14 species of lemurs and over 200 of them there. And they get to explore and live in beautiful forests on the premises. And we've done many tours where we've explored the forest, but we've also gone into the Lemur Center. We've learned about the fossils. We've connected with some of the scientists in the field in Madagascar. So we've done a lot of fun things with the Duke Lemur Center over the years. We have Megan hanging out with us, who is always our trusty host out in the forest. So let's bring Megan in. Hey, Megan, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. I have my buddy Ethan holding the camera so you all can see my face for a moment before we get into the program. But I also have some lemurs hanging out in the trees around me. We've got Narcissa over here. So I will go ahead and grab the camera and let you see who you came here to see. And just be warned, I may have to do some moving because Narcissa here is a mover and a shaker out here in the forest. So I'll introduce you. Narcissa here is the female of our ring-tailed lemur pair that lives out in our forest habitat. I told you, there she goes. She gets the zoomies. So I will follow along. I'm going to try to keep the camera as steady as I can. And then what's going to happen is they're going to settle again and we'll get in close again. So I know it's a little harder to see right now, but they settle every now and then. So these two are ring-tailed lemurs living in natural habitat enclosure number 1 here at the Duke Lemur Center. As Joe mentioned, we're a 100-acre facility, and most of that is natural forested habitat for the animals. And this is where they are happiest, especially in the summer months when they get lots of time out here. They get to kind of come out, climb around, snack on whatever they want to snack on in the forest, and just enjoy doing all their natural lemur behaviors. So that was Fritz that I just got close to right there. Fritz is Narcissa's companion. So he is the boy or the male in this group. And actually, even with the stream and it being a little harder to see, there's some pretty obvious differences between these two. So one of the things we have to make sure of here at the Lemur Center is we know every single individual. We know exactly what they look like and how to tell them apart. And with these two, that's pretty easy because Narcissa, who's now really close to us on the fence there, she has a collar on, and that collar has a radio signal that tells us where she is in the forest, and hers is red. And then Fritz, who's in the back now, has a green collar on. Also, Narcissa's just very dainty and petite. We joke that she's like a ballerina. She's very slender, and she's very dainty, and she's always active and zooming around. And Fritz is built more like a bodybuilder. He's a little heftier. He moves a little slower usually. And so these two are pretty easy to tell apart. But that's an important thing to consider when we're keeping an eye on the lemurs, studying them, taking care of them, is making sure we know who is who. So now Narcissa's hanging out in the forest here. Woo, she's moving fast. I'll try not to give anyone vertigo as we move around and see her. So now she's up in a tree. So ring-tailed lemurs, I like to call them the poster child of the lemur family. They're the lemur that everybody knows and loves. But there's actually way more than just one type of lemur living in Madagascar in their native habitat. So the island of Madagascar is all the way across the world next to Africa on the southeast coast. And that one island is pretty huge. It's actually about the size of the east coast of the United States. So if you were to go from the bottom of Maine to the top of Florida, that's about how long Madagascar is, or kind of roughly the size of California on the west coast. So it's a very large island. And so you've got way more than just ring-tailed lemurs. You've got over 100 different species of lemur. living on that island. Depending on which kind of scientist you ask, that number changes a little, but we go with 108 species of lemur currently living in the wild. And they can be as tiny as a mouse, all the way up to as big as an indri, which might be as big as some of the students who are joining us today. They're about 3 feet tall. So they're pretty big lemurs. And there's all kinds of different types of lemurs in between, different colors of lemurs. And they all live on the island of Madagascar. Oh, we're zooming again. Let's see if I can catch up. So you may see some people in the background too. These lemurs are totally used to people coming in and out of their habitat, in and out of their home. It doesn't bother them at all. The person who just passed by me just a minute ago is one of our field research interns. So we have interns who come out and study the lemurs and look at what they're doing every day. We have interns who come out and help us take care of the lemurs. We even have an education intern who learns about our program and talking to people about lemurs just like I am today. All right, so let's see if we can practice our identification skills once they slow down enough. And maybe you can practice being a field researcher in your classroom. When they slow down, let's see if you can tell who is who. Okay, so right here, closest to the camera, I have a lemur that's a little bit bigger and has a green collar on. And then we have a lemur in the background who just zoomed away. So if you're practicing in the classroom your lemur ID skills, that means that we have Mr. Fritz right here, the male, who's a little bit bigger and has a green collar on. And then Narcissa already zoomed off into the forest and is very quick. You can see that Fritz just took a drink from a water bowl. They enjoy being out in the forest, but we also want to make sure they have fresh water available to them at all times so they can be comfy. So as Joe mentioned, we've got a lot of different lemurs living here. We actually have 12 different species of lemur now. And that means over 200 individuals are living here at the Lemur Center. So that's quite a few different animals to live on that 100 acres. And so we have to know everything about them, everything about taking care of them, including what they like to eat. So ring-tailed lemurs in the wild live in the southern spiny forests of Madagascar, where food is really hard to find, water can be really hard to find. So in the wild, they're actually really good at eating whatever they can get their hands on. The fancy term for that is opportunistic omnivores, meaning I'll eat whatever I can get my hands on, sounds good to me. That means bugs, great. If that means fruit, that's fantastic. It might mean a small lizard if that's what they can get their hands on. The funny thing is, here in North Carolina, these guys have learned that we will give them the best possible food. So they'll sometimes turn their nose up if a grape isn't the right ripeness for them. So we like to joke that in the wild, they're opportunistic omnivores. But here at the Duke Lemur Center, they're kind of divas about what they eat. And they're right, we will give them the best food they can possibly get. I'm going to pause so I can get closer and not make too much noise. Here we go. So hopefully you can see again, practicing your ID skills. We've got our larger ring-tailed lemur right here. That's the male, Fritz. And then in the background, further along the log, we have Narcissa, our more dainty female. Oh, Fritz is moving through the bamboo though. So you can see that these guys are very active, but they're staying pretty low in the forest. They're not going too high as they move around. Here's Fritz here. So ring-tailed lemurs spend about half their time on the ground in the wild. They actually spend a lot of their time on the ground, not as much time in the trees. Part of the reason for that is that they're from an area called the spiny forest. So you can imagine how nice those trees are to climb on. They're not always the most pleasant. And the other reason is that they're just comfy on the ground. They spend up to 50% of their time in the wild, and I'd say probably even more time here at the Lemur Center on the ground, because here, nobody's going to try to hurt them, nothing's going to try to eat them, there's nothing scary on the ground, so they like it down here. We do have a couple of other lemurs in our forest that live a little bit higher in the trees, and I'm going to go in just a moment to see if we can spot them, but since they like to live a little higher, they can be a little harder to see on the live stream. Oh, Narcissa just did a little call. If anybody heard a noise in the background, I'll see if she does it again. Okay, she didn't do it again, but it sounded kind of like, oh, kind of almost like a meow type of noise. That's a ring-tailed lemur contact call. So that was her way of saying, hey, Fritz, where did you go? And so Fritz isn't very good about responding, though. Fritz isn't very good at communicating with her. All right, so Fritz is getting deeper into the forest back there. I think this might be a good opportunity for me to take you to go see some shafak and see if we can see the other type of lemur who lives in here. All right, so I'm gonna actually turn off my camera for just a moment because I'm gonna move rather quickly and I don't think it's gonna be pretty to look at on the camera. So I'm gonna keep my audio on. That way nobody gets a tummy ache while watching me move quick through the forest. And we're gonna see if we can find our cockerel shafak. Cockerel shafak are a totally different type of lemur, and they live in a different part of the forest, and they move in a different way. But if anybody who's watching has ever seen the show Zaboomafoo, or maybe you've seen the show Wild Kratts or Kratts Creatures by the Kratt brothers, then you might have seen a shafak before, because shafak are very famous for being on the show Zaboomafoo. Okay. Yep, I can see them up there. Okay, they're going to be really hard for you to see on the camera, but we're going to do our best. All right, I'm going to see how good my zoom does on here. So they're up in the tree, way up there. So I bet they're pretty impossible to see. You can see a little bit of movement up there. So that's where our cockerel shafak are hanging out, way up in the tree. And that type of lemur is actually bipedal like us, meaning two-footed. They move around on 2 feet. So when they're moving through the trees, they are going to hop around, landing on the trees feet first and keeping kind of their heads above their shoulders and above their hips, kind of like when we walk around. But unlike us, they're not going to put one foot in front of the other. They're going to jump all the way across to the trees. And if you can see a little bit of branches moving up there, that's them climbing around in the trees up there. So unfortunately, since I am not 20 feet tall, I can't get as close to them as I do to the ring-tailed lemurs, although someone did just offer to put me on their shoulders, but I think that would be a little tough right now. So they're a little bit harder to see. But that's the great thing about having them in this forest habitat. I'll show you a little bit of the forest here too. So this is all natural North Carolina forest. In front of me, I can see all different types of trees. We've got pine trees, we've got deciduous trees, or trees like oak trees or maple trees where the leaves fall off when the seasons change. And I think everybody on this stream has deciduous trees where they're living too. And that means there's also things like blackberry bushes, mulberry trees, blueberry bushes that all grow out here in North Carolina naturally and are great snacks for our lemurs. Now, you don't have a blackberry bush in Madagascar. You don't have mulberry trees in Madagascar, but you do have other types of fruit. So the lemurs here are really, really good at telling what food is okay to eat and what food might be not safe for them to eat. And so they are great at living out here in this habitat in North Carolina. And I am going to pause there and turn off my camera one more time to get back to our ring-tailed lemurs and see if maybe now's a good time to start taking some questions while I get us back to those ring-tailed lemurs who are a little more cooperative.
All right, let's do that. Let's have you head over there. Our first question here is coming in via YouTube, and they're wondering, what's keeping them in the enclosure? Can't they jump over the fence?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm going to turn my camera back on as I'm walking past our fence to show you. So here you can see a great example of our fence line, and right up here, you see a net across the top of it. And you're right, that fence isn't high enough to keep a lemur from climbing up and over. They can climb trees that are, 80 feet tall. But the fence line there has a net that has a light electrical pulse. Think about what it feels like to get stung by a bee. Nothing long lasting, but just enough for the lemur to say, ooh, I don't like that, and to decide they don't want to climb up and over. And then if you notice, we've got a tree right here, but we don't have any matching trees on the other side of the fence here. So we keep the trees cut back about 10 to 15 feet on either side of the fence. And the way lemurs move through a space is either they climb up and over something or they leap across to the other side. So we've made sure that they can't leap across and they can't climb up and over. And then just in case, we also have what's called a dig barrier. So there is fence that you can't see that's buried under the ground lemurs aren't going to dig under the ground to get out, but animals that live here in North Carolina like coyotes or bobcats might try to dig in and hurt the lemurs. So that way we can make sure that they're totally safe in their forest spaces.
All right. I've got another question here on YouTube, and they're wondering, do any of the lemurs have babies? Do they have babies at the center?
Yes, absolutely. So we typically have around 15 to 20 births here at the Lemur Center every year. So that's why I said we have over 200 lemurs. I didn't give you an exact number because it changes, right, throughout the year. But any of the babies that we have here are part of a breeding plan. So we work with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or the AZA, and we look at how many ring-tailed lemurs are there in zoos and how many would we like there to be, and then how many babies does that mean, which zoos have the space for it, and who's going to be the best genetic match. I'm going to pause for 1 second because I got to do a little off-roading to get to where the lemurs are so you can see them again.
Yep.
My sister's really keeping me on my toes today. Okay. And so, for example, in ring-tailed lemurs, that means when we know who'd be the best match, who would make the happiest, healthiest babies, then we are going to talk to the zoo who maybe has the female or the girl in that family. And then maybe that girl comes to live here at the Lemur Center. Or we might send a male or a dad out to live in another facility, but it's all very carefully managed. So we know we're going to have happy and healthy babies, and we're not ever going to have too many babies for the space that we have.
All right. Well, I think it's time we play a little bit of Kahoot, and then we'll get back to our Q&A action. So, in fact, I may take a few questions while the Kahoot is loading, but I made a little Kahoot behind the scenes. Some of the questions were answered, and some of the questions are for students to think about a little bit as they answer them. So I'm going to put that up on the screen now. It's going to take just a second to load. You're going to want to go to kahoot.it. So if you put that into your search bar, kahoot.it, it's then going to ask you for a PIN number. I'm going to share my screen, and you will see that today's PIN number is 906 461. So, anyways, yes. If not, your teacher could pop this up at the front of the classroom. You could shout out your answers to him or her. If you can't join with technology, that's perfectly fine. You can still answer the questions and see how you do. And then we always have students joining from home. So if you have a phone or maybe a tablet, there's a QR code next to the PIN number, and you can scan that QR code. So while we wait for some classes to join us, for some students to join us, I've got a few more questions here. All right, I see someone in grade 4 here at the front of the classroom.
How high lemurs jump?
Ooh, that's a great question. How high can lemurs jump? So that totally depends on what type of lemur we're looking at. 'Cause remember, I said there were lemurs that were as tiny as a mouse and lemurs that were as big as like 3 feet tall or a small kid. So let's talk about the ring-tailed lemurs, because that's who we're seeing right now. Ring-tailed lemurs can jump, if they really, really need to a vertical height of like over 6 feet, but that's like a really big jump for them. Lemurs are a lot better at jumping across than they are at jumping up, which makes sense, right? Because they live in the woods and they want to be able to jump between trees. So in this particular species, I'd say they could jump over 6 feet up in a pinch, but they'd have to have something really spook them to jump that high.
All right. Great question. Let me see how our Kahoot is doing. Do we still have students joining, or should we start? We still have a couple trickling in, so I'm going to do another question. This time, why don't we see here? Miss Cork's group is wondering, are lemurs only found in Madagascar, or can they be found anywhere else?
Great question. So if you're looking for lemurs in the wild, oh, sorry, they are like moving through this bamboo forest. I'm going to slowly walk while I answer this. So if you're looking for lemurs in the wild, then you're only going to find them naturally in Madagascar, or there's some mongoose lemurs, which is a specific type of lemur, no relation to a mongoose, but some mongoose lemurs ended up on the Comoros Islands, which are between the northern tip of Madagascar, and mainland Africa. Otherwise, the only place you're going to see lemurs is at your local zoo, or of course by coming to the Lemur Center.
Okay, let me switch screens up a little bit here and let's play some Kahoot. So I'm going to hit start on our Kahoot quiz. There's some multiple choice. There's some true and false. The quicker you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. We're being counted in, and our first question's coming up here. How many species of lemurs are at the Duke Lemur Center? Did Megan tell us it was 4, 7, 10, or 12 species of lemurs? So at the Duke Lemur Center, do we have 4, 7, 10, or 12 species of lemurs? We know there's over 200 individual lemurs, but how many species do they have? Got a couple more seconds to get your answer locked in, and then we'll take our first look at the leaderboard. All right, good job, crew. It is 12 species of lemurs. Let's check out the scoreboard. Green ostrich in first place. So let's go to our next question. Here's a true or false. Madagascar, we know it's a big island, but is it the largest in the world? What do you think? True or false? Madagascar is the largest in the world. It's definitely a big island, but do you think it's true that it is the largest island in the world? Got a few more seconds. Oh, good job, crew. That is false. It is the 4th largest island in the world. There are a few islands that are bigger. Greenland, New Guinea, Borneo are bigger than Madagascar. Okay. Next question coming our way. The green ostrich still in the lead. Another true or false. Lemurs are female dominant. That means in the groups, the females are in charge. Is that true or is that false? What do you think? That in the groups, the lemurs, the females are dominant. They are calling the shots. They are in charge. Got about 5 more seconds to make your choice. All right, good job, crew. That is absolutely true. We're going to jump to our leaderboard. Still the green ostrich, might go tape to tape. What are some threats facing lemurs? Is it large populations of people? Is it loss of habitat? Is it climate change? Or do you think all of the above is the best answer, that all those things are impacting lemurs? So we've got large populations of people, loss of habitat, climate change, or all of the above. So which of those do you think is impacting lemurs in Madagascar? 3 more seconds. All right, it is all of the above. I thought we'd trick a few more students who were trying to go really, really fast, but good job listening to the answers and choosing the right one. Okay, let's look at our podium. In third place, we've got the purple snail. In second place, the smiling yeti. And holding down that top spot, spot number 1, the inspired stork. All right, very cool. I'm going to come back from our screen share. We're going to spend the rest of our time in a little Q&A action. And it looks like we have one of our lemur friends there too. Very cool. Okay, we need to go to Mrs. Bland's class. I'm going to bring them up onto the screen. Oh, I think we have...
Belong up here. You can do that to him all you want, but your foot doesn't belong up here. I was here and then Hunter pushed me over.
All right, who's got a question there for us, Mrs. Bland's crew? All right. Can you hear me okay there, Mrs. Bland's class?
Yeah, we hear you, but we're too busy.
All right, perfect. Do you want me to come back for a question? Okay, I'll come back. You get one ready for me when I come and check next. Okay, St. Paul's School. Let's see if we can get them in. I know they were having a little speaker trouble, but I think we've got them now. Hey, St. Paul.
Say hi.
Hey, everyone. Good to hear you. Got any lemur questions?
Anybody have a lemur question? Lee, you have. They wanted to know if a lemur's ever escaped the habitat in South Carolina.
Okay,
All right.
yeah, I can answer that one. So we've been here since 1966. So we've been here a very long time. So the answer is, has a lemur gotten where they're not supposed to be? Yes, that has occasionally happened. But we've got all kinds of systems in place to make sure that the lemurs don't get past a second door. So think about if you've ever been to a dog park, or if you've ever been to a butterfly house at a zoo, where you've got to go through 2 doors to get in and out. That's kind of how everything works here at the Lemur Center. So occasionally a lemur has gotten into the wrong spot, but we've never lost a lemur. We've always been able to get lemurs back to where they're supposed to be, either through using those 2-door systems or through using a lot of positive reinforcement training, where lemurs will go right into a crate because they know it's a safe space and they know they get fun treats when they do it. So no lemurs lost, but occasionally someone's gotten temporarily misplaced for a little while over those 55 plus years.
All right. So we've got a grade 2-3 class. They were in here with us, but they disappeared. So maybe they had to duck out for something. But they did send me a question here in the chat. And they're wondering, can you tell us about some more special adaptations of lemurs?
I can absolutely do that. What a great question. So lemurs have a lot of cool adaptations. They share some things in common with us. So if you look down at your hands and you look at your fingernails and your long fingers and your grabbing hands, where you can have your thumb wrap around the opposite direction. Sorry for the forest noise. Hold on. Ugh. So if we look at our grasping hands and our fingernails, that's something we share in common with the lemurs. You can see as they're hopping around and running around in the forest, they are grabbing onto the bamboo, hopping to their next location, and holding on to branches as they go. In fact, let me see if I can get close enough to Fritz to really show that off. So you can see even on his foot right there, his big toe even goes the opposite direction. So one thing lemurs have extra special is that their big toe can grab just like our thumb can grab on our hand. So they can grab with their hands and their feet, which is really useful when you spend a lot of your time climbing around in trees. Another cool adaptation that only lemurs have and we don't have is something called a tooth comb. So basically, when they want to clean themselves off, instead of grabbing a comb or a hairbrush, they have a comb built into their own mouth. So their bottom jaw, the front teeth in their bottom jaw right in the front of their mouth, actually grow out at an angle right towards their lip and act like a little fine-tooth comb, literally made out of their own teeth. So it's a pretty cool way to be able to clean yourself. But when you clean yourself with your teeth, you can sometimes get things stuck in there, right? Because they're walking around in the forest. They might get bits of leaf or a bug or something stuck in their fur. So then they have to clean out their tooth comb. So I think one of the weirdest things that lemurs have, one of the weirdest adaptations, is something called a sublingua. And a sublingua is basically a second tongue. So underneath their regular tongue, they have a little piece of cartilage, which is the stuff we have in the tip of our nose that makes it kind of wiggle a little bit, or in the tips of our ears, it's kind of wiggly, but also kind of hard. They have a bit of that cartilage under their tongue, and it forms a perfect little toothpick because it's a little triangle, and they can use the point to flick things out of their tooth comb after they're done grooming. Let me see. The other adaptation they have that is very obvious on our ring-tailed lemurs and part of their name is this nice long tail. Now, this tail is not prehensile, so they can't use it to grab things like some monkeys can in South America, but it is really nice for balancing. You can see that as Fritz is moving around, he's holding it up and kind of walking along this branch. But if he's moving through the trees, he can move his tail to one direction or another to help him balance. And so kind of like when we're walking on a beam, it's easier when you hold your arms out. Same kind of idea, but they've got that built-in counterbalance with their tail. I think those are the best lemur adaptations I can highlight for now, but there's so many more.
All right. Lots of really cool adaptations. Very cool. I think I've got another question here on YouTube. Let me grab it. So Ms. Markle's class is wondering, with climate change having impacts in places around the world, are there any changes you have to make in North Carolina to help keep the forest healthy and a good place for the lemurs?
No, that's a great question. And I think we're still figuring out the answer to that question, right? Because climate change is such a big subject, and we're seeing lots of changes that we don't even realize are changes until a few years later, right? Because we just think, oh, it's really hot a little early this year. And then that keeps happening over and over and over. So I'd say the biggest thing we've noticed is that the time of year when the lemurs can be out and comfy in their forest has shifted a little. And so we just have to be careful and keep a close eye on that forecast. And everything we do here at the Lemur Center is based around what makes the lemurs comfortable. So that means me tromping around in the woods going through spider webs this morning. That's what they're happy doing, so I do it. Or if that means us not being able to have tours on a day because the lemurs need to be indoors if it's a little chilly or a little too hot, then we're going to adjust that. When the lemurs do get too hot, we can do lots of things to help them cool down. Of course, the forest has lots of shade. They're naturally going to seek it. They also can lick their hands and feet. That's a natural way they get water to evaporate off of their hands and feet. They'll even hug the base of a tree, do a cute little tree hugging behavior to cool themselves off. If we see that kind of stuff, we can come along with maybe some coconut water or fruit juice mixed into a bunch of water. We could give them ice cubes and just kind of encourage them to hydrate more, just like we need to when it's too hot outside.
All right, let's get a few more camera classes up on the screen. So our fourth graders look like they have another question. Let's get them in here.
How many lemurs are left in the world?
Oh, that's a great question that leads to more questions. So good job. So when we talk about lemurs, we can talk about the species, right? So we already said there's over 100 species left. What I didn't mention is that at least 17 species have gone extinct already. So there were even more lemurs even 1,000 years ago than there are now. But if we talk about individual lemurs, I'm going to give you an answer that's probably going to shock you. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know how many lemurs are left in the wild. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. And I'm going to give you a question to think about to help answer that. If you had to figure out how many bugs lived in your backyard, do you think you could answer that question? That'd be a really hard question to answer, right? Because there's so many different types of bugs, and you can't see all of them at the same time. And so it's the same kind of thing with lemurs, where it's actually really rare to know exactly how many of an animal are left in the wild. And with 100 different species, there's been a long time since anyone's counted some of those species in the wild, and probably not in every area. So it's a tough question to answer, and one maybe all of you could help answer one day.
All right. Thanks for the question. Good job, grade fours. Okay, let's go. Miss Bland's class sent me one via the chat, but I'm going to pop them in if you want to ask it live. You want to ask the question you guys sent in the chat? Yep, awesome. Okay, who's coming up? Who wants to ask the question?
You can ask on this.
Well, okay, you gotta unmute it for me. Or whatever.
Okay, I think I caught it. Can we get it one more time, nice and loud?
It's not.
Here.
Turn on the volume.
Oh. The volume?
Okay.
We gotcha.
Obviously, you're not sure what to do, so back away, honey. You have to go in the right corner, the bottom right corner. This is why we don't do stuff like this.
You guys go ahead. I hear you nice and clear. I can hear you.
Unfortunately, what we have here is garbage.
All right. Maybe they can't hear me right now, but what they wanted to ask was about a lemur's lifespan. So Megan, roughly how long does a lemur live for?
So again, this is another one that it depends a lot on the different types of lemurs. But let's talk about the one we met just now, the ring-tailed lemur. They tend to live until they are in their late teens, maybe even early 20s in the wild in Madagascar. But they tend to live into their mid-20s to 30s here at the Lemur Center, which kind of makes sense, right? Remember how I said they were spoiled, get all the perfect food, nobody tries to eat them, there's no predators living here. So it makes sense, right, that they would live a little longer. And I am moving now because our other lemurs that were so hard to see earlier have come down lower. So we're going to get a chance to look at our cockerel shafak while I answer some more questions here. So let me introduce you really quickly. This is Gertrude right here. She's got a collar on. And then right next to me, kind of hidden in the trees right here, is Ferdinand. So I'm going to move around and get you good views of them while we answer some more questions.
All right, perfect. I'm glad they came down for us just in time. That's awesome. Now, they can jump pretty
Yeah.
far, can't they, Megan? How far can the Shafox jump?
Absolutely. So remember how I said there was that, ooh, if they're desperate, they can really move jump for the ring-tailed lemurs? If you're a Shafak, you can jump a good 30 feet across. Remember, I said lemurs are better at jumping across than they are at up and down. So they are really, really good at jumping across. But I'd say daily, they make jumps of 10 to 20 feet, no problem. And you can see what I was talking about earlier here, where Ferdinand is staying on his hind legs as he jumps around. And he's following Gertrude because, as we learned, you all did very well on the quiz, lemurs are female dominant, meaning the girls are in charge. So Ferdinand is very good at following Gertrude and sticking with her because he knows that's how things work.
All right. Let's bring in St. Paul School, see if they have one more question for us. What do you think, St. Paul School? You got another one there? I think someone's coming up.
Wait, is it?
It's unmuted, Lachlan.
Do they ever swim in water?
Oh, very interesting question. So what the answer the textbook will give you is no, lemurs don't swim. They would never swim. But I happen to know of a zoo that got lemurs and put them in a habitat that had a moat around it. And those lemurs went into the moat and went swimming and got out. And lemurs are never supposed to swim. So the rule is lemurs don't swim. However, individual lemurs may disagree with that rule. And that's important to remember, right? Animals don't always know what's written in a textbook about them. Sometimes they go rogue and do funny things.
All right. Great question.
Say thank you,
Thank
Lachlan.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's get our grade 4s in again. I see someone patiently waiting.
What are their relatives, or are they the relatives?
Great question. So the relatives, and I think this question is about like the relatives of the species of lemurs, right? So what other types of animals are related to them? Yeah, okay, great question. So lemurs are in the primate family, which is the same family as all of us. So they are in the same family as humans, monkeys, and apes. And that's why they have so many things in common, right? Because they have those grasping hands like we do. But they're in the earliest branch of the primate family tree. So they evolved a long time ago to be pretty different. So they look pretty different. So their closest relatives are going to be animals called lorises that live in Southeast Asia. They're very cool if you've never seen them. They're like a very slow potato on stilts. You'll know what I mean when you see them. And they're also closely related to an animal called a bushbait, which is a very cute animal that lives in South Africa or Southern Africa and is a very good jumper, kind of like the Shafak we're meeting now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great question. So I have a question here in the chat, and I bet you, Megan, you'll be able to answer this for us. Well, there's two, but let's go with this one first. Ms. Korsklass would like to know, are lemurs, would you say they're mischievous?
Oh, I can definitely answer that one. I will say my answer is going to be based on the lemurs I've worked with here at the Lemur Center. So I don't know if the same thing would be true of the lemurs in the wild, but I would say lemurs can be playful. They can be mischievous just like us. It really depends on their personality. For example, Ferdinand right here is a great example. Ferdinand is a male Shafak lemur. But the other day I was out here and he was playing and wrestling with Gertrude, his friend out here. And then all of a sudden the ring-tailed lemurs ran by and Ferdinand turned around and tried to play with the ring-tailed lemurs. He tried to do play face, which is kind of an open toothy smile. And he puts his hands on top of his head when he wants to play too. It's a very cute face. But when he did it to the ring-tailed lemurs, they just looked confused and ran away. They didn't know what he was trying to do. So it can depend a little on the individual. We've also had lemurs who seem to know when a keeper really has to get moving and they don't want to cooperate and get into their crate or go into a different area. But I don't know if that's the lemurs being mischievous or if it's just bad timing on our part.
All right. We have someone watching all the way over in Portugal right now, and they want to know how many lemurs or how many babies can a lemur have at one time? Is it one, a pair, or can it be more?
Love that. Also love Portugal. Shout out to Lisbon. So I would say that it, again, depends on the species. So the ones we've met so far, these cockerel shafak right here, they're typically going to have one baby at a time and one baby each year. Ring-tailed lemurs, who we met earlier, can actually have twins sometimes, pretty often, but it's usually like it is in humans, where certain moms tend to have twins and other moms tend to have one baby at a time. And then there's other types of lemurs who will actually have a litter, so they'll have 2 or 3 babies at a time. So there's different strategies for different moms in the lemur family. Basically, there as many different ways as you can think of an animal trying to survive, a primate trying to survive in Madagascar. Some lemur does it. They've got a lot of diversity.
All right. Well, Megan, I think we are at that time, although it's really hard because we're getting a great view of our shafaks right now, being really patient with us and hanging out. It was fun to watch earlier when they were jumping from tree to tree as well. They're so so fearless and so elegant as they make their way through the trees. It's very, very cool.
They are, yeah. So Ferdinand is giving us a great view here using those grasping feet, that grasping hand. So I know it's about time, but hopefully this is a good place for us to end so you can see more. And if you want to see even more, we do have a totally free virtual tour on our website of lots of different lemurs at the Lemur Center if you're craving even better views of these guys.
All right, very cool. Well, Megan, let's start off with a big shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much to our classrooms on YouTube. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for playing Kahoot with us. We've got a few classrooms had to duck out for recess, lunch for some of them, I think. But let me pop in the ones that are still here. If you guys want to give a big wave, a big goodbye and thank you to Megan and to Ferdinand, the Duke Lemur Center. It's very cool to have you hanging out with us today. And then Megan, thank you so much. It's always great to have a visit to the Duke Lemur Center. And we can't wait to visit the forest again.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody. Love sharing the lemurs with you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, a great rest of the school year.